Canada's guide on how not to build a railway. Please subscribe my channel and share video with others. The nation that needed a track in 1867, Canada was young, a fragile collection of provinces stitched together by promises and politics. But one province, British Columbia, stood on the edge of the continent, isolated by mountains and wilderness. When it agreed to join the Confederation, it made one bold demand: build us a railway to the east. It was an impossible task, and everyone knew it. The distance alone was staggering: over 3,000 miles of untouched land, frozen rivers, and granite mountains. But for Canada's leaders, the railway wasn't just steel and steam, it was survival. Without it, the country could literally fall apart. The bribes that laid the tracks. What began as a patriotic dream soon became a political disaster. To win contracts for the massive railway, business tycoons poured secret money into the pockets of politicians. The most famous scandal, the Pacific Scandal of 1873, rocked the nation. Letters leaked, evidence surfaced. It turned out that Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald had taken tens of thousands in bribes to fund his re-election campaign. The country was outraged, the government collapsed, and the dream of a transcontinental railway seemed to vanish overnight. But in Canada, dreams don't die easily. They just find new tracks. The men who would build the impossible. A few years later, a new company stepped forward, the Canadian Pacific Railway, CPR, led by a group of businessmen who weren't afraid of risk. They had grit, greed, and just enough insanity to believe they could tame the wilderness. They hired thousands of workers, farmers, veterans, and immigrants from China who came to build what no one else dared. The workers were paid little and pushed hard. Explosions, landslides, and accidents were daily routine. Some called it the Railway of Bones because so many never made it home. But the line inched westward, steel rails cutting through forests and rock like a scar across the continent. Tunnels, snow, and ghost towns. The hardest part lay ahead, the Rocky Mountains. Blizzards buried the camps. Avalanches crushed entire crews. Supplies froze before they could reach workers. Some engineers thought the project should be abandoned altogether, but the CPR pressed on. They blasted tunnels through solid granite, sometimes losing weeks for every few meters gained. Temporary towns sprung up, places like Donald, Rogers Pass, and Field, wild settlements of gamblers, thieves, and dreamers. They lived fast, drank hard, and often disappeared with the next snowfall. Every mile was bought with blood, the spike that saved a nation. On a cold November morning in 1885, in a lonely spot called Craigellachie, British Columbia, the final spike was driven into the ground. Cheers erupted, champagne flowed, the Transcontinental Railway was complete, and Canada, for the first time, was truly connected from coast to coast. But what looked like a victory on paper was hiding a storm of problems beneath the surface. The price of progress. The CPR was supposed to bring prosperity. Instead, it brought debt. The government had poured millions into subsidies, land grants, and loans. The costs had spiraled far beyond control. Meanwhile, small farmers complained that the CPR charged outrageous rates to ship their grain. Towns without railway stations withered and died, while those with stops thrived overnight. Canada was divided once again, this time between the connected and the forgotten. And yet, the railway kept expanding, not because it was smart business, but because it was national pride. Too many tracks, not enough trains. In the early 1900s, politicians made another grand mistake. They decided to build two more transcontinental railways, the Grand Trunk Pacific and the Canadian Northern. They wanted competition. They wanted glory. What they got was bankruptcy. The railways overlapped, cutting through the same territories, chasing the same few passengers. By the 1920s, both had collapsed under crushing debt. The government had to step in and merge them into a new national company, Canadian National Railway, CNR, to clean up the mess. It was official. Canada had built too many railways and learned too few lessons. The ghost rails of the North today, if you travel deep into the Canadian wilderness, you'll find them. Rusted tracks disappearing into forests, bridges half swallowed by rivers, and tunnels echoing with nothing but wind. They are the ghosts of failed routes, the lines that were meant to bring civilization but instead brought bankruptcy. Some were abandoned after a few years, others never saw a single train. They stand as monuments to misplaced ambition, a physical reminder of what happens when dreams outgrow reason. The empire on rails. Despite its disastrous beginnings, the railway changed Canada forever. It moved settlers west, opened cities, and transformed trade. It even helped Canada survive the world wars by transporting troops and resources across vast distances. The same rails that once symbolized corruption and chaos eventually became the backbone of a modern nation. But make no mistake, it was never easy. The price was paid in lives, money, and mistakes so grand they could fill entire history books. The lesson etched in steel. In the end, Canada's railway story isn't one of failure, it's one of warning. It shows how vision can blind, how pride can destroy, and how sometimes the hardest path still leads to the right destination. The Canadian Pacific Railway may have been built the wrong way, with greed, scandal, and suffering, but it achieved what it set out to do. It held a country together. And today, when the freight trains thunder through the Rockies or whistle past the prairies, they remind the world of one eternal truth. You can build a railway with mistakes, but you can't build a nation without sacrifice.